Okay, hi, welcome back. My name's David Blissett, and in this week's video, we're going to be reviewing some of the work that's taken place between April and May 2021. Now, I find myself doing these devlogs, and it's getting to be that I'm taking energy away from the actual development to actually do these. But I do also find that it's important to document what it is that I'm actually building, because the size and scale of the work is so vast, and it's covering so many different areas that you leave this some of this workload undocumented for a longer period of time, and you come back to look on it later on, and you'll be kind of guessing as to what it is that you were actually doing at the time. So what have we covered in the last couple of weeks? So we've looked on VR, specifically being able to do single-handed and dual-handed weapon holding, and doing also the gravity grab. So that's where the gun's in the distance and you're reaching out within VR to be able to grab the gun. And then at the same time, there is the other side of things where we've actually been looking at revising the level design. Even what you're looking at here now, this is one of the plugins that I've been using to do the poses for the gun hold, right? So the idea here is that the actual framework allows you to, in both in real time, i.e. in the game, or within the editor, to manually pose the orientation for the hand and the fingers, so that when you actually come to do the grab for the gun, the placement of the hands is automatically assigned based on the distance from the actual gun and what buttons that you're pressing at that time. So if you're trying to do a grip on the controllers and you're holding the gun, then it knows how to orient the fingers and things like that. Again, it's a lot of R&D. It's like unless you actually do the work, actually come to do the implementation, you don't know about these APIs. They're not a part of the base Unity scripts. I mean, a lot within Unity is extended via some kind of a plugin, unless you're actually rolling up your sleeve and doing this yourself. And if you do choose to roll up your sleeve and do this yourself, don't expect to be doing any kind of release. Within the average or hopefully shorter time scales. The plugins do allow you to kind of speed things up. They're tested, and if they're bugs, somebody's actually working on them, or one would hope so anyway. So what you've been previewing here is some of the weapons, doing like I said, the distance grab, and also being able to rest the guns within their slots, their respective slots. So we're just kind of testing that out within the harness and making sure that whatever changes we made in terms of the posing for the actual hands against the guns, they actually work. And at the same time, I'm trying to get a kind of feel for just how severe an impact I'm having on the frame rate. So in the top right corner there, that you probably see that we're maintaining a frame rate somewhere around 30 frames per second, between 20 and 30 frames per second. Now, considering that there's supposed to be zombies running around the scene, not to mention the rendering off the levels at the same time, that's not in this screenshot here. But we need to win back at least another 60 frames for this to be something viable. But I do know that within the scene there's a lot of other geometry, loose geometry as well. So I'm not going to really worry too much about that right now. So the next thing that I started to look on was how to optimize the textures. So the general principle here is that if you build a texture atlas, you should be able to have multiple textures for different parts of your scene level assets going into a texture atlas, so that you're not loading multiple textures, right? Or at least from a material side of thing, you don't have too many textures being loaded into the scene, because texture swaps is one of the reasons why you're going to be losing performance, and that's what that bit of work was. So still testing it out, but at least we know what we need to do the optimization. And like I said at the beginning there, it's like that frame rate, we need to get that up. So I've got roughly about 450 prefabs in a pack that I've purchased, and it needs to be optimized. And for that, I needed to get the actual prefabs themselves into some kind of modeling package so I can actually do the optimization work. And that's a bit of a challenge. So if you think about it, if you've got assets loaded into Unity in a kind of configuration that gives you demo levels, as it were, it's not usually normal that the transformation information can easily be accessed to be able to recreate what you have in Unity in a package. But fortunately, if you're working with a tool like Houdini, there are ways and means of being able to somewhat extract that data. It's manual. You're going to be needing to roll up your sleeve and do some coding. But the approach I've taken was to generate what we call Json data that's going to be reflecting both the number of prefabs and also the placements of the prefabs within the level. All right. This is not a standard workflow by any means, but technically it's just position, rotation, and scale information. The scale data does not map nicely from what I found between Unity and this tool that I'm using here, Houdini. But after spending about 2 weeks on it, I was able to get the level loaded into Houdini in a similar manner to what you would do within to similar how it actually looked within Unity itself. So here now I'm building out a level builder that will work with those prefabs. So the first thing was to kind of prove that I could actually get that data moved across. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just FBXs, right? But if you've got 450 individual FBXs and you need them to be coordinated in some way, yeah, you need to have a kind of roadmap in terms of how you're going to do that. Now, SideFX Houdini do have a level builder tool that they demoed, actually more than one over the years, but that will allow you to break up a wall in a kind of sci-fi panel approach. Whereas what I want to be able to do is to break up just as an individual line, so that you could have, you know, a one unit, a 2 unit, a 4 unit, a 6 unit, and a 10 unit, right? And have that randomized. And then within that kind of randomized workflow, then being able to place those prefabs on the line. So it's similar to the breaking up of panels, but breaking up panels will mean then that you're having random structures on a wall. The geometry that I've got already has that baked into it, right? So if you can appreciate, you'd have a 10 by 3 panel, right? So 10 units by 3 high, right? So it's already got that baked into the panel itself. So it just needs to know that it needs to be a 10 unit, i.e. it's going to take up 10 units along that line. And then after that, you know, it should just kind of flow into its own. So here, I'm looking at this here, what we're doing. So essentially, this is the workflow, or some of the workflow for, I believe, recovering from an error that, not so much an error, I had some corner units that were not being reflected in the workflow, and this is me doing some investigation work just to make sure that we can somehow recover. It's just what it is. You're working on something and you're testing it and trying to patch it as you go. So even here now, I'm looking at the point information for the line and trying to figure out where things are going wrong. So right now, I'm trying to get the execution for the entire line, as it were. So that's going to take its own sweet time. It's cooking at the moment. And here we go. So it would appear that the missing bit of geometry that wasn't there earlier has now been found. And like I said, so you're looking at that and it looks like we're breaking up each individual panel. But no, the panels themselves have been designed in such a way that when brought together, it gives you that kind of effect, right? And so we're just trying to take advantage of that. So here's actually cooking now, and I'm able to kind of get a feel for what's going on within the function by generating these print statements. Kind of old school approach, but it is just what it is. It's how you have to do things. And what I've done is, if you can see there where we're doing RGB on the CD is the color information. And so the points that match this particular criteria will get red being applied to the point. And when you actually then copy the geometry or the prefab data onto it, it's inheriting that information. This is one of the nice things about Houdini, right? And so it allows the bit of geometry to stand out, to say, hey, this was a problem area, right? And this is where you need to investigate to make sure that whatever feature you're trying to implement, here I'm trying to copy the panels to the points. And I can see, okay, fine. In some areas, maybe this specific panel, even though it does fit based on the criteria, it doesn't fit visually, right? So it's almost like, why would you put that specific panel at this location? So, yeah, it's taken a long time to get here. And if you've been following what I've been doing the past year or so, you would note that I did another level builder maybe about a year ago. But I would like to think that that was more of a prototype. Probably wouldn't want to put that under any kind of a production spotlight. More so because the levels were incredibly simple, right? It's a hallway, and then that leads on to another hallway, and that leads on to another hallway. And that was fine for the prototype and just trying to prove out how to hit a certain level of efficiency in terms of frame rate. But in terms of like gameplay and having a fun play space to work with, yeah, probably not. And so that's why we're revising the level design and looking to take advantage of these panels here, get a bit more eye candy going, and hopefully something that's a bit more pleasing from as far as a play space is concerned. So as far as things are right here now, yeah, I think that's pretty good. So what I'm just gonna kind of document here, and this is just for my own sanity, because once I've done this, I might not look on this again for a year, 2 years, if I even ever have to look on it again. And so this is the algorithm that will break up the line, right? So for each segment, right, or within Houdini speak, for each primitive, a line is a primitive, right? As long as it's got 2 points, it's a primitive, right? We're going to be going through this specific workflow. I'm not going to talk you through all this code because, at the end of the day, you can kind of see what's going on here. But essentially, we're chunking up the line into 2, 6, 3, 10, and what's that last one there? 6 again, right? And then we're just randomly chunking it up, but not only randomly chunking it up, as we're going from 0 through to the length of the line, endpoints as it were, we're also making sure that we're not trying to break off the next section more than the length of the actual line, right? So if we've got a line that's only, say, 10 bits, and the first chunk is 6, that means we only have a line length of 4 to actually work with after that, right? So the routine itself does take that into account. Apologies for all these comments here. It's just one of those things as a developer, as you're coding, you figure out what works and what doesn't, and depending on what doesn't, you then comment that out. But you don't necessarily want to delete it, because if it's not in source control and you spent time typing up, you might want to bring that back. But this little function here, it didn't take long to put it together. So right now this is Python. I had originally started, if you look on the nodes there, one of them's kind of grayed out. I started coding this first in Vex, which is like a Houdini native language. And something wasn't working. I did contact the guys at SideFX about it. I don't want to go into it in this video here, but they were nice enough to get back to me and help me kind of get a gauge as to what might have been going wrong. So I decided to shift the logic over from Vex into Houdini. So like I said there's a line, and essentially the algorithm, like we just showed you, is chunking up that space. But it's not just doing it for that individual line, it's actually going through the entire level sequence and applying the same logic, which is one of the strong powers of Houdini. I mean, if you ask me to do something like this in Maya or 3ds Max, I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm pretty certain that, I mean, both tools are incredibly powerful. But once you learn the mindset of working procedurally within Houdini, it's a bit difficult to go back. I mean, I spent years learning Mel, more so for being able to do rigging within the environment. So that's where you're setting up bones and then putting controls against the bones so that you can actually then do animation within Maya. And then didn't really use it. The thing is that if you go back like 10, 15 years ago, the roadmap to game development wasn't as clear as it is today. One, you didn't have access to tools like Unity or Unreal Engine at those times. And two, the training material, a lot of the training material was about 3D, but it was about 3D within like a movie studio type environment where you're making cartoons, or you're working on things like Gollum for Lord of the Rings, and you need to be able to make different kinds of creatures and things like that. And while some of that logic does translate into gaming, i.e. you need characters, they need bones, and you need a rig, and you still need to record animation, a lot of it was more high-end, if that makes sense. And so it took years. I mean, if I started looking at 3D from like 2002, 2003, you might go into Dillon's or Waterstones and purchase books like on a monthly basis, some for just traditional corporate work, whether that be web design or object-oriented programming, C#, C++, that sort of thing. But when you came to look on 3D, it was very tool-centric, and so you'd be doing a lot of R&D on, how to rig a head or how to rig a character's body, and then you'd get a workflow for how to set up the animation. But there wasn't any kind of guide to say, oh, and by the way, there's this 3D engine that you can use this in. Because unless you were in that space and working as a developer building games 20 years ago, there were no tools. This was not something you could do at home. Whereas today, in 2021, a matter of fact, maybe I like to think the past 7 years or so, these tools have become available for independent developers. Anybody who wants to get in the space, even the kids, to be able to download these tools from the provider's website, would that be Unreal Engine, Unity, and be able to get into the space. And even now, you have providers that are making platforms available. So even Amazon, they've got Lumberyard, where you're actually working in the cloud and building out your 3D environments. So the tools have become more accessible. The knowledge has become more widespread. So knowledge that you'd have to purchase books for 12 years ago, you go back to like 2010, prior to them being shut down, Dillon's and Waterstones on the high street, you had to buy books, and you had a lot of your own personal time to kind of get into this space. But you go back to 2015, Epic came over to the UK, and I believe they've launched a course, so you could get into computer, not necessarily computer programming, but like game development at the university now, which is again phenomenal. So these kids now, they can make a choice leaving high school and say, this is what I want to do. I want to work in this space. And so in the next couple of years, one would like to think that not just competition, these kids can be in their final year and saying to themselves they want to launch their own gaming studio. Again, you got to be pretty focused to say that that's what you want to do. You want to try and get into this kind of space, but the ability to do so is here. The future has arrived, as it were. But anyways, so this is what we've been working on the past, like I said, April, and we're halfway through May right now, and currently I'm at a stage here now where I'm saying, okay, fine, the level's coming together pretty well. This is me working on the skirting, using the same principle that I use for the walls, right? It's not so much that they have to match up, but you've got a certain length for the line, and you just need to be able to break it up so that you can vary the geometry that's going to be placed at those locations. And you're doing this at a high level, right? So if I was in Maya and I was moving geometry around, I might be usually moving these bits of geometry out one at a time. Here I'm working on an entire level, and if I had 100 levels here and I wanted to change the skirting information or the wall information for all 100 levels, it's the same logic, right? So you get it right for an individual level. Obviously, this is, you need a bit of planning and forethought going into this, but that's how you work. And obviously, if you're working by yourself, it's easier to be able to do this. Trying to sell this as a vision to a team who's not working procedurally might bring you a bit of pain, more so from the perspective of, like I said, again, imagine if you went to university and you learned how to build an asset or a level one at a time, and you were used to just moving these prefabs with your hands, with your mouse, one at a time, in order to get something that's visually appealing. And then now there's some architect standing beside you saying, well, that's not efficient. How about we just spend 2 weeks and create a routine and generate the entire level? That's what this tool allows you to do. But trying to sell that to a team who, might not already be in that thought process, good luck. Fortunately or unfortunately, obviously this is the time of COVID. We've just had like a year plus worth of lockdown, and the country's going to be reopening soon. So, hey, you're working by yourself, so you can make that kind of call. So this is where we are at the moment. Right now, I'm trying to just investigate what's going on with some of the geo. So I've exported the geo and gone into Maya, and I can see that some of the normal information is pointing in the wrong direction. And it was like, I could have done that in here, but just to kind of eyeball it in Maya. And so it's become apparent that a specific bit of geo the prefab itself, that's pointing in the wrong direction and needs to be reversed. So just kind of eyeballing it, and so like right now I'm going to have to figure out how to isolate or figure out precisely which piece of geometry. Remember, we're copying this here in a procedural format, right? So it's now I need to find out which one of those pieces needs to have its normals flipped. So I'm just working my way back through the network. So right now I'm isolating the skirting data, and you can actually see the normals. So there's the normals pointing in the wrong direction. And so now the thing is to actually find that specific piece. I think we've actually found it here now. And all I need to do is to say, hey, reverse that normal. And hopefully that should be a fix for that. So the normal's gone in, and so I'm just going to drop down a reverse node here. Boom. The normal points in the right direction again, and the rest of the network. So it's a non-destructive movement. Again, when you're working within Houdini, it's kind of like working with your construction history in Maya. I mean, you probably don't really want to do that often, because again, you can just drag and drop anything into the scene and not really have to care about your construction history. But the way how you work with the nodes within Houdini itself is kind of like you're building the construction history, but it's non-destructive, and you're just dropping in nodes wherever they need to be. And like I said, it's its own thought process. But the more time you spend with the tool, the more you get used to the nuances of it, and you obviously get the benefits of being able. You can take advantage of the benefits, and they're there to be had. It's just making that time to learn what the capabilities are and how to get around any kind of gotchas as and when they do crop up. So at this stage here now, I mean, I would have left this video to the end of the month, but the speed that I'm actually being able to progress now has kind of ramped up. And so I just thought to myself, if I wait another 2 weeks, a lot of this content, as it were, or what I was doing at the time, I might forget. So it was just like, okay, you're at a reasonable point now. You've just been able to generate these levels. And before going off and start thinking about building out multiple levels, how about we just put a pause on things and kind of document where we are, so that I don't forget. But listen, if you've been able to get through this far with me, I'd like to thank you for listening. Again, we're going to be continually trying to document as we go. So if you like the content and want to see more, please hit that subscribe button. And also, if you like what we had to say, leave us a like. All right, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks again.